Hi, this is a short presentation to explain equivalent reinstatement as a basis for compensation claims in the UK. Now, when compulsory purchase law developed originally, it was under the basis of compensation on value to the owner. When the Acquisition of Land Act came into being in 1919, the idea of open market value was established as the correct method, giving us our 6 rules of compensation, with Rule 2 regarding that legal rule regarding valuation. However, from time to time, there may be situations where the compensation based on market value is not sufficient to fully compensate the stakeholders. And the 6 rules also included Rule 5 as an exception to Rule 2. And this mechanism is called equivalent reinstatement. And these 6 rules still exist in our law today in the 1961 Land Compensation Act. So to quote that full law, Rule 5 of Section 5 of the Land Compensation Act 1961, it is where land is, but for the compulsory acquisition would continue to be, devoted to a purpose of such a nature that there is no general demand or market for land of that purpose. The compensation may, if the Lands Tribunal is satisfied that the reinstatement in some other place is bona fide intended, be assessed on the basis of reasonable cost of equivalent reinstatement. It's quite a mouthful, but one big long sentence. When would we use this? What sort of situations could this apply to? Well, it's generally when there's no market value for a building, or perhaps where the market value would not be enough to fully compensate the users, the stakeholders. Sort of buildings we commonly see are churches or other religious buildings, could be community centres, scout halls, similar club buildings used by political parties. There's various different types that might qualify. But in order to qualify, there are 4 rules that need to be satisfied. The first is that land, and by this we mean land and buildings, but the land is devoted to a purpose which would continue but for the CPO. Second of all, there is no general demand or market for that purpose. 3, that there is a bona fide intention to reinstate. And 4, then subject to satisfying the above rules, the tribunal has discretion to adopt Rule 5, but this discretion should be exercised in their favour unless the cost is disproportionate to the loss suffered. Okay. Also remembering in most cases the user would have to be of a charitable or non-commercial nature. Basically, the claimant, whether they're a leaseholder or a freeholder, they're entitled to the cost of the site, a new site for construction of a replacement premises, together with any associated fees and costs. Disturbance compensation is also payable. If the premises that are being taken, being compulsorily acquired, if they're in need of repair, then we can make deductions from the reinstatement costs to reflect the costs saved for the old premises. Otherwise, the tenant of equivalency wouldn't be satisfied, because the affected parties are getting a brand new building at the expense of an old and possibly dilapidated building. Whereas it should be like for like, they should be the same, put in the same state as they were before. Now, the date of valuation will be just whenever it is reasonable to start that purpose. Let's note that when we think about the building, it's not the actual shape, size, and look of the building that decides whether Rule 5 applies. It's not that conclusive test. If we think of, for example, religious buildings are treated as falling within the scope of Rule 5, not because religious buildings such as churches, mosques, synagogues are generally of a design that makes them look like what they are, but rather it's the use, what they're used for. Okay. There's no general demand or market for the purpose. Okay, not the actual quality and design of the building. Let's look at a quick example. A military museum. housed in an industrial building is subject to a compulsory purchase order as part of the development of a new town centre, and that museum is run by a group of volunteers. Building has an external floor area of 300 square metres, gross internal area of 265 square metres, and the site's total area is 600 square metres. Current building's little old, requiring some £30,000 worth of repairs and upgrades, and similarly sized plots sell for 600,000 per hectare. Now I've got some construction costs here of £850 per square metre, and the question is how much the museum's volunteers claim as compensation if the basis is to be equivalent reinstatement. Well, we can look at what we know. We know the cost of replacement sites, 600 square metres, £600,000 per hectare, so that gives us some £48,000. The building will need to be based on a net internal area, 265 square meters. Sorry, a gross internal area will be 265 square meters, giving us around £850 a square meter, giving us something like 225,250. And then we can add the land cost of 48,000. I mean, competition here would have to be some 273,250. And we're saying that there's some age and obsolescence of the existing building of some £30,000. So compensation should really be more like 243,250. And of course, the claimants can also claim disturbance, relocation costs, professional fees on the construction, other aspects. Note, of course, that the trustees could claim for compensation based on market value rule 2, and that could amount to a greater compensation in some cases. The way to approach this would be to try a market value based on one method, and the market value is one method, and then equivalent reinstatement as the other, and then see which would come up with the higher figure. Remember, maybe that market value, there could be lost payments that are claimed, but as it would be technically a development, there were vacant possession would be required, so there'd be no disturbance. Whereas under equivalent reinstatement, there could be a disturbance claim. So we need to be careful. And if we were advising the stakeholders, in this case, the military museum volunteers or the trustees, we would try and find what would give them the maximum amount of compensation. So there's some case laws here, and I know with generally sort of a university student level where this presentation is pitched at, the Zoar Independent Church Trustees versus Rochester Corporation is generally considered that sort of leading case, or rather the beacon case that we use. And that's all I have to say on equivalent reinstatement. Thank you for watching.